Hello everyone, and thanks for hanging out with us for the Behind the Numbers weekly listen and e-marketer podcast made possible by VTEX. This is the Friday show that reviews the most tell me more media news stories of the week. I'm your host Marcus Johnson. In today's show, the impending attention recession.
Are we seeing the acceleration of a pre-existing trend due to the pandemic? Are we seeing a trend that is changing because of the pandemic and then snapping back to normal? Or are we seeing no change at all?
Peloton stumbles.
Doesn't seem like they're trying to cut costs to increase profits here. It seems like this is a clear play to drive subscriptions.
What shoppers think of SMS marketing.
But the moment that they try to turn that into a broader marketing channel, I think a lot of people do get turned off. So I think they just have to tread very carefully.
Amazon's podcast moves, TikTok for small businesses, and how the weather can make you friendlier. All right, folks, join me for today's episode. We have three people. Let's introduce them. We start with our Director of Reports Editing. It's Rahul Chadha.
Nice to be here.
Hey, chap. We're also joined by one of our analysts on the retail and e-commerce team. It's Blake Josh.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, friend. And finally, we have our principal analyst covering TV and video. It's Paul Werner.
Great to be here, as always.
All right, folks. So what do we have in store for you today? We have 4 segments as per usual. We start with the story of the week. We're talking about the attention recession. We then move on to the game of the week, where our contestants, Rahul, Paul, and Blake, will try to give us the most interesting answers they possibly can from each of the 4 stories that we have for you. We then move on to our relatively new segment called Working From Somewhere, part of the show where we talk about the shake-up in our working lives. And finally, Dinner Party Data, where we discuss the most interesting thing we've most recently learned. So, story of the week, the attention recession. As lockdowns lift, media firms brace for an attention recession, writes The Economist. Consumption of everything from books and podcasts to music and video games shot up. And as the amount of spare time at home starts to shrink, the attention boom of 2020 is giving way to what Mark Mulligan of Media Research, a firm of analysts, dubs an attention recession. The squeeze on free time means that media companies are now all asking the same question, says Brendan Brady of Antenna, a company that measures video streaming subscriptions. Is this now a period of stability, or are we going to fall off a cliff? So, gents, a lot of interesting points, in my opinion, in this article. What did you make of this attention recession piece? What stood out to you?
Well, what stood out to me was that the study estimates that we've had about 15% more spare time during the pandemic, which makes sense just if you allow for commuting time or the lack of commuting time. But what really stood out for me was that there's so much more time spent on activities that have nothing to do with work, which suggests to me I'd like to see this data paired up with productivity data, because we're spending tons more time on gaming, on podcasting, on video. And I just can't help thinking that some of that is happening during work time, because there really almost is no other time when it could be happening.
Yeah, the gaming thing. So gaming in particular, the single biggest new media habit apparently to be formed during the pandemic. An extra hour per week folks spent gaming last year, the largest percentage increase of any media category, showing no signs of fading, this article noted. Craig Chappell of Sensor Tower noting last year people installed 56 billion gaming apps. That's a third more than 2019. An interesting generational shift as well. A February poll by Deloitte finding that all other generations of Americans said TV and films was their favorite form of home entertainment. Gen Z, those young people, ranked them last after video games, music, web browsing, and social media. So one reason why this trend is likely not to fade in the future.
I think what stood out to me was really, are these all behaviors? And this is a sort of framework that we used in a bunch of our forecasting reports that were for covered forecasts that were affected by the pandemic, which is, are we seeing the acceleration of a pre-existing trend due to the pandemic? Are we seeing a trend that is changing because of the pandemic and then snapping back to normal? Or are we seeing no change at all? And I think what this report is calling out really is that, we're seeing a lot of activities that have accelerated those changes in time spent with digital types of media. One of the things that this article called out too is that legacy types of media, specifically cable, broadcast, and theatrical films, have seen declines. And really the pandemic has just accelerated that pre-existing trend. The other X factor for me is the Delta variant. I hate to be pessimist, but are we assuming too much by thinking, we're following that same idea that we're going back to reopening and all these different avenues of life? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's just a sort of, I wouldn't say funny, but it's interesting to look at an article that was published in early July and sitting here talking about it at the end of August. I think, unfortunately, the context has shifted a little bit and not for the best. But I think, Rahul, I think you make a really good point. Just nowhere is sort of the fog of the pandemic more prevalent than when you look at sort of time spent on behavior, because a lot of what we see in our forecast are these sort of unprecedented spikes in things like print consumption and television consumption that are sort of this direct result of the pandemic, which has been this strange catalyst. But then you have other things like subscription OTT viewing and podcasts, and a lot of these sort of digital trend adoptions that were upticking anyways saw really explosive growth in 2020 and are still expected to build on that growth going forward, albeit maybe not as consistently had the pandemic not had happened. But the fact that we're still seeing some gains in time spent with these types of media, even after such a huge spike in 2020, I think says a lot about sort of just where our eyeballs are going when we're looking at all media in general.
Yeah, in terms of where our eyeballs are going, interesting note from Emmett Shear, chief executive of Twitch, saying that people don't have specific slots in their schedule for video. They think, where am I going to get entertainment? And as lockdowns lift, he thinks Twitch's main competitors will probably be basketball, frisbee, and the park. It's kind of similar to what Reed Hastings was saying about Netflix's biggest competitor being sleep. And as we see a lot of companies kind of straddling the lines of business and what they do and kind of encroaching on their other spaces territory, it does seem as though they're also thinking about time spent as a whole, and more time spent cleaning your house is taking away from time spent that could be on their platform. So their biggest competitor might not be someone who is directly within their same space. Another interesting thing that jumped out to me was music's share of overall listening time going down. At the start of the pandemic, podcasts and audiobooks accounted for a fifth of all listening. By the end of 2020, their share had risen to 1/4. So a lot going on as well within different types of media. Audio, for example, a lot of things changing within that world. Social media, a lot of things changing within that world. TikTok, the amount of time TikTok users spend on the platform is higher today and was last year than the amount of time Facebook users spend on the platform. So lots going on under the surface. We should mention this study from Media is also across the US, Australia, Britain, and Canada as well.
I thought the audio findings were interesting and a little surprising, because I was under the impression that podcast listening had actually not grown as much in the early part of the pandemic, because again, podcast is very commuting intensive. Obviously, it's picked up a lot, and I think we're going to get into some interesting podcast developments later in the episode, so we'll save it for that. But the fact that music was down, I guess it surprised me a little bit. I mean, maybe it's because personally I find it, when I'm home, I find that more amenable to playing music, whereas podcasts I find, more natural for commuting, but maybe that's just me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess there just aren't as many people out there who need to use music to drown out the constant chatter in the office. I think it's an undervalued use for music.
Yeah.
So one of the quotes from this article says, as spare time dries up, the question is which of these newly acquired habits will stick and which will be dropped. So, gents, any thoughts on which ones you think are most likely to stick around? Is there a habit in your life or one you've seen in your field of research where you think that habit is, of all the habits that have changed, is most likely to stay?
Yeah, I think it's, I'm not even sure I agree with the premise of the question that we will have less quote unquote spare time. I don't think a lot of us have had more spare time. I mean, it's just maybe the commuting time. But the thing that I think is really going to persist is people working from home. And that is going to be true whether, even when offices fully open up, which I'm sure at some point they will, it seems that time might be further out than we had originally thought. But I think a lot of people are going to be insisting on at least having the flexibility of working from home part of the time, if not all of the time. So, I think that's going to be the biggest change.
Mm-hmm. Well, looking at our numbers for average time spent, speaking of the attention recession, our numbers for average time spent with media in America, 12 hours and 23 minutes in 2019. That's how much time the average American spent with media in 2019, 12 hours and 23 minutes. Folks added an hour somehow of media time to their total in 2020, reaching 13 hours, 21 minutes. We should specify, if you are using your smartphone and watching TV at the same time, it counts as an hour for each. So that's how we add this up. So 13 hours and 21 minutes last year, up an hour from the year before. This year, it will drop 9 minutes to 13 hours, 12 minutes. The following year, it will lose 6 minutes next year. And then it's going to kind of hover around from about 2022, 2023 onwards, about 13 hours and 5 minutes. So it has spiked by an hour. It has come down a bit, but the resting heart rate is above pre-pandemic levels. In share terms, traditional media accounted for 45% of time spent, things like print, radio, TV, in 2019, 45% of time spent in 2019. By 2023, it will be 36%, so from 45 to 36. But it would have gained time over that stretch, adding over 40 minutes, despite losing share. The share is dropping because digital time will add an hour and a half from 2019 to 2023, led, not surprisingly, by smartphones. All right, that's all we've got time for the lead story. It's time now for In Other News, but first a quick word from our sponsor, VTEX. Everyone is talking about digital transformation, but what does it mean in real life? Digital Insider is a new podcast series about the digitization of retail, where business leaders, academics, and thinkers discuss how businesses are transforming and give their perspectives, practical advice, thought process, and lessons learned. Go to digitalinsider.com to learn more or listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, folks, we are back. It's time now for the game of the week. Today's game, what's the point? The part of the show where we read out 4 stories and have our contestants, Rahul, Blake, and Paul, tell us what they think is the main takeaway of the story. Okay answers get 1 point. Good answers get 2. And wow answers get 3 points. Each person gets 20 seconds to answer before they hear this. Whoever has the most points after 4 rounds wins and gets the last word. So we'll start with Paul for Peloton. Peloton stumbles is our first round. Few benefited from the at-home fitness phenomenon ushered in by the pandemic like Peloton, notes Courtney Brown of Axios. The company's connected fitness subscribers, people who own the bike and pay for monthly classes, reached 2.3 million in Q2. However, growth slowed considerably. They added 400,000 new subscribers in Q1, but that slowed down to 250 in Q2. Down 38% quarter on quarter. Also, Q2 2020 folks were taking 25 rides a month. So last year's Q2, this Q2 2021, it was down to 25 to 20. As a result of slowing growth, the exercise equipment maker is cutting the price of its cheapest spin bike again by about $400. So it's down to $1,500 now, similar to the near $400 they shaved off last September 2020. Paul, Peloton stumbles. What's the point?
Well, one thing that I thought was interesting is just how much money Peloton makes from subscriptions as opposed to hardware. So, everybody focuses on the price of the bikes, but the subscription income they get from someone who pays the $40 a month to subscribe to all of the content and the free, the lessons, in about 3 years, it equates to the price of that bike. But really what I think the point of this is that if I had just paid $400 more for my Peloton bike and I saw the price drop by $400 and this has happened twice, I think I'd be really, really upset.
Blake.
Yeah, this is all about driving subscriptions at this point. Their services are going beyond the bike at this point, and I think they're realizing that the bike should be more of this Trojan horse to get the device inside the home, and then you're going to have that drive subscription further ingrain people into the Peloton ecosystem. Doesn't seem like they're trying to cut costs to increase profits here. It seems like this is a clear play to drive subscriptions.
Maybe the bike should be shaped like a horse. Just to drive home Blake's point.
I would pay for that. I would get that one.
Yeah, I'll just ride the carousel.
Is there an instructor? His name is Homer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I have anything to add. It's like, obviously Peloton wants to move into this recurring revenue model. It's more stable. It's they have like a better idea of how much money they have coming in. And Peloton, has been facing, I think, problems with its product line. It's trying to expand into not just bikes, but also has a treadmill product. But it got hammered by a recall that cost them a lot of money. And I think its last fiscal quarter was a drag on its profits. So, and they're going to be facing, I think, increased competition from other at-home exercise equipment companies, like Mirror is one of them. So, yeah, I think it's trying to figure out where can it get its money from after it's maybe run out of greenfield in terms of who's going to buy this pretty pricey bike.
I love how Rahul was like, I don't really have much to add apart from these 4 amazing points. But aside from that, I've got nothing.
Trojan horse.
So in terms of, where they're going to get the money from, Peloton may be working on new products as well as its bikes and treadmills, apparently working on a long-rumored rowing machine and possibly a heart rate monitoring armband. But will it be enough to stem the numbers of people who are heading back to the gym? Gym chain Planet Fitness said in August it had recouped 75% of members lost during the height of the pandemic. As Rahul pointed out earlier, that could reverse given the new Delta variant causing chaos. Story 2. We start with Blake. What shoppers think of SMS marketing? In July, e-commerce marketing platform Yotpo asked 2,000 folks across the US, the UK, and Australia to tell them what shoppers want from a brand's SMS marketing program or what they don't want. Some highlights for you. Number 1, over 80% of folks are signed up to get texts from at least one brand, 80, but over 40% get texts from 1 to 4 brands. Second point, 23% of shoppers opt into SMS before their first purchase, 32% will wait until their first purchase, and 18% will opt into SMS after a few purchases. And the third point here, over half, 54% of shoppers said that unlocking a one-time discount code, say 15% off their first purchase, would make them want to opt in to SMS marketing. So Blake, what shoppers think of SMS marketing? What's the point?
Yeah, I think even though marketers will tell you that consumers are open to SMS marketing, I think it's still sort of an unnatural place for consumers to be interacting with brands at this point. So therefore, the value proposition of signing up for SMS is going to have to be very apparent in order to get customers or potential customers to buy into it. So right off the bat, things like discounts are a good incentive for driving signups before purchase, post-purchase, getting order updates, things like that are very practical. But then hopefully you'll be able to retain those customers on your list going forward. So yeah, value proposition, sort of the big thing here in the SMS area.
Rahul.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just be parroting Blake, but yeah, I agree completely. I think SMS is a fundamentally different medium. It's an intimate medium. And I think, you can look at email, I guess, for some sort of a cautionary tale about what happens when you turn the marketing channel into a conduit for basically spam. I don't think people are really going to stand for that in their SMS messages. And there has to be some kind of utility in the messaging that you get, like Blake mentioned, which is something like a shipping or tracking update. I think a lot of people are signing up for these one-time discounts and then unsubscribing very quickly. I also think, creative is a challenge still in the medium. The space is still kind of fractured in terms of technology. You can't necessarily access rich media. And so for people who are trying to figure out from a marketing perspective, what's the message? What are my constraints? Is it still just 160 characters? That still remains a challenge, I think.
Paul.
I think it's a very high bar for marketers to use SMS as a marketing channel. I mean, yes, to send people practical information that they need, like about a restaurant reservation or something that's geographically oriented or even a discount, that's one thing. But the moment that they try to turn that into a broader marketing channel, I think a lot of people do get turned off. So I think they just have to tread very carefully.
Move to our third round. Amazon's podcast moves catch advertisers' attention. Apparently, Amazon's charge into podcast signals just how attractive the format is to advertisers. Per Bloomberg, writes insider intelligence analyst Daniel Konstantinovich, he notes that Number 1, in February, Amazon closed a deal to buy podcast studio Wondery. Number 2, in July, Amazon bought the distribution rights to the podcast Smartless, hosted by Will Arnett, Jason Bateman, and Sean Hayes, now one of the top shows in the US. And number 3, in June, Amazon acquired podcast hosting and monetization platform Art19. So Rahul, Amazon's podcast moves apparently catching advertisers' attention. What's the point?
Every time I hear, I think we're in the phase of podcasting where obviously there's a lot of consolidation and M&A activity. But every time I hear a story about the increase in podcast advertising, my question still remains is this just, are advertisers sort of still getting seduced by the relative newness of the medium? I think podcasting still faces a lot of challenges in terms of closing the loop. Like, how do you measure ROI on these campaigns? I think there are things like vanity URLs, but really there's not a comparable type of analytics, I think, to other forms of digital advertising. And I wonder if we're just seeing some kind of rush to get into podcasting, and advertisers still haven't really figured out these fundamental questions about what's the utility of this medium for me.
Paul.
Yeah, I agree with Rahul. When I see that our forecasts call for $1.3 billion in U.S. podcast advertising this year, and that number is actually going to more than double by 2025, that's staggering. And it does put that idea of a possible bubble in your mind. But I think the motivation for companies like Amazon and Spotify and Apple is that with podcasting, they basically own the content if they develop this programming, whereas with music, they still have to license it. So it's a lower profit margin for music than podcasts. So I think that's what's getting all these companies really, really interested in this medium.
Blake.
Yeah, I think, because of the fact that Prime Video isn't ad supported, Amazon doesn't really have a central ad supported media property. Obviously they have IMDb and I think maybe a couple of other ones, but the idea for, podcast advertisers to have access to an ad supported Amazon platform and, potentially access to all of the great first party shopper data that Amazon has is exciting. But the thing here I think that's interesting is that with Amazon Music, Prime members already have access to Amazon Music, which is ad-free. And, you're looking at a massive, massive chunk. I believe we forecast over 63% of US households have access to Prime. So the number of people who are listening to an ad-supported Amazon podcast platform, I'm just wondering sort of what the reach there is.
Axios, we're talking about podcasts and Amazon. Axios just reported a few days ago that Amazon is investing heavily in a new live audio feature that's similar to other live audio offerings like Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces. See what happens there. Our final round, TikTok for small businesses. In July, Insider Intelligence analyst Nina Getson noted that Vimeo was bringing its video production tools to TikTok to help small and medium-sized businesses produce video ads using Vimeo Create, the platform's video ad creator. This came before TikTok's Small Biz Block Party series of workshops to help small businesses get the most out of the platform. Also, in a Media Post article by Colin Kirkland, he notes that Burrell Associates just released a study measuring which social media platforms local ad agencies deem to be very to extremely effective in Q2 of this year. Facebook, unsurprisingly, up front with 58%, then YouTube 38%, Instagram 36%. They were the three top slots, followed by TikTok in fourth place, 28%. This was above LinkedIn, Twitter, and local-centric Yelp. The study was conducted with 700 local US ad agencies. Half had less than 10 employees. 70% of these agencies are now using TikTok, double what Burrell saw 6 months ago. So, Paul, TikTok for small businesses, what's the point?
I'll just mention two quick things that jumped out at me and surprised me a bit. One was that TikTok partnered with Vimeo, because I would have been under the impression that TikTok had the capability to build out this platform for small businesses on its own. But, good for Vimeo. They do bring a lot to the table. The other thing I was surprised about in the Burrell study was that Snapchat was really, really low on the scale, after LinkedIn, Yelp, and Pinterest. So TikTok is clearly, sort of like leaping ahead of Snapchat at least, and definitely playing in the same leagues as these bigger players like Instagram and YouTube and Facebook.
Blake.
Yeah, I think, particularly for small businesses, the really strong viral nature of TikTok is sort of can lend itself really well for, a small business with a product that's looking to sort of like get off the ground very quickly. I'm just thinking like how quickly, really, really small and unknown creators can go from, being smaller players to like massive influencers in a really short period of time, thanks to the viral nature of TikTok. So I think they're really selling their platform as, a place where brands and products can grow really quickly because of the sort of viral nature of the platform as well.
Rahul.
Yeah, I think really the move here by TikTok is to lower the bar for SMBs who might have trouble generating creative. They don't have the resources to do that. And I think it fits nicely with the recent partnership that they launched with the e-commerce platform Shopify that would let businesses create a tab for their shops and sync their product catalogs on TikTok as a platform. So, the moves are just in accordance, I think, with their long-term strategy. Like, let's make it easier for businesses to operate on this platform. How can they use it? And then how can they generate revenue? And how can we get a piece of that action?
Indeed. 2 points really quick. Nina noting that video ads have strong staying power in the minds of consumers after shoppable images and video ads were the second most likely to influence US adults to make a purchase. It's from a Jan 2021 report by Bazaar Voice. And also, it's a lot of people on TikTok. However, it's a lot of young people. 3 in 4 TikTok users still below the age of 34 and will be in the future. According to our numbers, at least, that share is not likely to change into 2023, 4 or 5. All right, that's what we've got time for the game of the week. This week's winner, cue the drum roll. Who could it be? It was a very good competition, but Rahul won this week. Congratulations to Rahul. Gents, that was really close. Some excellent points in all seriousness. So great job to everyone. Rahul just edged out the competition to be the champion of the week for this week's game. Rahul, congratulations. You get the belt and you also get 30 seconds of airtime.
Oh, thanks. I just want to give a shout out to Lee Scratch Perry, who passed away recently, the upsetter, amazing musician, producer. If you don't know him, check him out. He was one of the progenitors of dub reggae, and he's got an incredibly massive back catalog. So if I was going to plug anything this week, it'd be Lee Perry.
Very nice indeed, sir. All right, it's time now for our relatively new segment, Working from Somewhere. All right, so this is the relatively new segment, as I mentioned, where we discuss what it's like to work from home, to work from somewhere, basically not to work from the office. We talk about everything related to how people's lives have been shaken up in the work from somewhere world. We've got one article for you this week from Ashley Bell of Snack Nation, was the catalyst for this conversation, talking about work from home perks and how they're going to be changing / introduced depending on whether people worked from home already pre-pandemic and they had some kind of perks which were different, or whether companies are now introducing work from home perks because so many of their employees are now there. So what are we talking about? We're talking about, well, when you're in the office, a lot of people get free breakfast or free coffee. A lot of people may be offered in-office classes for certain things. And so now people are moving or have moved back home to do a lot of their work. What are companies going to be offering those employees as perks so they still get those perks despite not being in the office? So, gents, I've got a couple here. Some of these are just from me, coming up with a few. Some are from Ashley Bell from Snack Nation. And so I thought it would be interesting to, I might mention this on a previous one of these segments, where if you're an employee, you get to have 3 of these perks and you get to pick from them. Or if you're an employee, you get $500 worth of perks and you can add them up however you want it. So I've got a couple for you here. I'm wondering what you think of them and what you think would be your ideal work from home perk if you could pick, if you ran HR for a day. So a couple for you. $100 home office stipend every 6 months. A $50 coffee gift card each month. Or should say drinks gift card, because not everyone drinks coffee. $250 exercise gift card could be used for annual gym membership towards a bike, maybe rock climbing membership, yoga mat, free weights, running shoes, etc. $200 off therapy sessions each year. $500 child care credit. $100 swag box, mugs, thermoses, notepads, pens, reusable shopping bags, earplugs, things like that. a $50 voucher for a local museum or tour tickets, $200 off any online course, $200 off a local cleaning service. If you've got little ones running around, you don't have time to clean because they're no longer at school when you've got time to do stuff like that, or free work from home wellness snack boxes delivered every now and again. So there's some of my thoughts. You could total that up where you have the home office stipends, maybe you get the coffee gift card, maybe you then get the therapy sessions and the museum tickets, and that would tally up to roughly, say, $500 for you individually, but you can customize it. What do you guys think? And what are your own personal work from home perks if you could pick?
Marcus, how much instant coffee would a $50 gift card buy? Is that a lifetime supply? Or
Probably, yeah. Probably at least 2 lifetime supplies.
Probably just like a dump truck, just drop it off in the apartment.
You beat me to it, Blake. I was going to bring up instant coffee as well.
I should have added that.
But no, I think in all seriousness, there are a number of startups that are attempting to bring office culture to a virtual environment. And I think that's very, very difficult thing to do in a way where I think everybody feels included and satisfied. So for me, it's more about the physical perks. Like, I think, improvements to your office space that's a big one. I know, for myself and other people who live in small apartments in urban areas, I think just sort of staring at the same surroundings all day can be a little bit drowning. So having, a new chair every couple of months, or maybe, even if it's just like some new plants or whatever to surround your desk space, I think, things like that could definitely go a long way for me.
For me, I'm really big on food, and I once accepted a job when the hiring manager said there was free coffee, so that actually tipped the scales for me. But the one I'm really going to zero in on is technology and tools. I think that, we're doing all these virtual meetings, and now we're recording this podcast remotely. There are 3 things in particular. People's home internet connections. I think the stronger the connection, the better everything works. I don't think a lot of attention is paid to video quality and lighting and things that need to happen to deliver video. And then also just, audio gear, like, for the podcast. But even if you're doing a video meeting, you need good audio. Those things I think are still kind of lagging. And if it were me, that's where I would want to focus resources.
On that point, shout out to Victoria, who edits the show. She also does a million other things in the background, one of which is getting all of our audio equipment set up before the show, making sure everyone has the right audio equipment, which is a heck of a task, considering that everyone has slightly different computers, microphones, headphones, recording software, levels of ability to help dial this stuff in. So shout out to Victoria for helping us get that sorted. Rahul, anything?
I would say, unlike Paul, I'm less enamored with the idea of food. I've made what I hope is a temporary shift to elastic waisted pants. It might not be. I think really what appeals to me about remote work perks, I don't know if it's actually that fundamentally different from what appealed to me in pre-pandemic life, which is, like, to be perfectly honest, more money and time off. And like Marcus, you mentioned a lot of the ways that could manifest is with the gift card, but really things that could get me out of my space. I mean, I feel really for people with young children right now. I'm not a parent, so things that can get me out of the house, maybe like a walking tour or an outdoor exercise class, or even a volunteer opportunities, I think is one of the really good ideas that was in that article. It would just be a really great way to kind of break my pandemic routine.
Yeah, the more money time off, I think you're spot on there, mate. Yeah, you could have 3 days off a year to volunteers. You mentioned they were mentioned in the article, extra home care days a year in addition to vacation days. So if you just, swamped with trying to take care of the kids, you can just take a day and it doesn't count towards vacation or sick leave or whatever. Maybe even, I don't know if companies are doing this, but saying to employees, we're going to have people meet up outside in the park on, a Friday afternoon. So take the day off, meet up with some of your colleagues you haven't seen in a year and a half plus, and have an outdoor event could be something. So yeah, more money in the pockets of folks to help them out in this very difficult time, and also ways to alleviate some of that stress with some time off perhaps. All right, so we've got time for working from somewhere. If you guys have any thoughts on working from somewhere, any articles you want us to discuss, please send those in, podcast@emarketer.com. If you have any other questions related to anything under the sun or above it, podcast@emarketer.com, get in touch. All right, folks, it's time now for dinner party data. This is the part of the show where we tell you the most interesting thing that we've learned this week. And we start with Rahul because he just won. He just edged out Blake and Paul. So Rahul, what have you learned recently?
Yeah, my data point is 3 hours, and that's the amount of time that kids under the age of 18 in China can now spend online gaming per week. You know, I think that's really interesting, one, because it's a reflection of China's, I think, ongoing crackdown on these like massive tech companies. You know, this is probably going to affect these gaming giants like Tencent and NetEase in China. And it also just an interesting mirror of the kind of anti-tech, big company, antitrust trends that are happening in the US. And it's really interesting for me to watch how these things are kind of manifesting in China too, which is, you know, obviously a somewhat capitalist economy, but like also still sort of state-run economy. And they just have the ability to like kind of hammer these large companies in a way that doesn't happen in the US.
Very nice. That's a good stuff. For some reason, I really wanted to press the bell after you finish talking. I've become conditioned to want to hit the bell after people
Hey man,
finish.
give into your bell impulses.
Thank you. That was a good
dinner
one.
bell, right?
Exactly. I always feel rude. You know when you go up to a hotel reception desk or something, they've got the little bell there. Do you guys press it? I always feel...
Never, because I always feel self-conscious about it too. I'm like, yes, the bell is there. It's for that purpose. And yet when I hit it, I think I don't want to be that guy.
Yep. Yeah,
I definitely ring the bell. It's very satisfying, as evidenced by Marcus's desire to ring that bell after anybody finishes speaking.
I like to go one step further and shoot a flare into the air. See how long it takes him to come running.
You think Marcus just like keeps that bell like around, like when he's like around the house, and if somebody's like, you know, if he wants to like get attention of someone else in the other room, just zing.
Effective way of training his roommates.
I so should have done that when I had roommates. What was I thinking? Moment wasted. Blake, what you got for us?
So this is like, it's somewhat mundane, but I was also very curious about this statistic. So this is from YouGov, and they asked U.S. respondents, when doing laundry, do you or do you not typically separate your items into whites and darks and colors? So 58% of the total population said they do separate their whites from their dark colors.
Thank
but only
goodness.
48% of Americans under 40 did, while 67% of Americans 40 and older separate their whites from their colors. So I, for one, do not. So I found that this was accurate. I'm also under 40. I don't really know what the point of doing it is. I understand they can run. The colors can run, but why don't you just use cold water? Or do I just not have fancy clothes? Is that what it is?
I think the warmer the water, the cleaner they get. So you put it on warm.
Yeah, but there's detergent.
Yeah, but that also helps. But I think it's like when you wash dishes with hot water. It's like it gets them cleaner.
Right, but I'm not putting like raw chicken on my t-shirts. Why do they need to be like...
You're doing your laundry wrong, Blake. I hate to break it to you. The raw chicken is an essential ingredient. Millennials. No, but I mean, I actually don't sort my laundry out of sheer laziness, and I've never suffered any ill effects. I think I'm also over 40. I don't know if that matters, but there's like actually a really long guide to how to do your laundry in Wirecutter, the New York Times owned company, if anybody's interested. And it actually dispels, I think what you're talking about, Blake, is actually a reflection of advances in technology related to doing your laundry that doesn't necessitate you do things the way that the generation before did anymore. But it might just be a losing battle trying to convince people that they don't need to sort their laundry by color anymore.
It seems like a waste of time.
Blake, very good. Paul, what have you got for us this week?
Yeah, so if Blake's entry was mundane, then mine is going to be dull, boring, and bland. So I just want to give proper warning about that. So this is about sister cities, and specifically the city of Dull, Oregon, population about 8,000, is paired up with the city or the small town of Boring, Scotland, population 80. Just to make this a little better.
Population 80?
Yes, population 80.
Okay.
Just to make this a little better, Bland, a small town in Australia, population about 6,000, just joined as a third prong in this, what's now being called the Trinity of Tedium. So there you have it. Sister
80
cities.
80 people. I'm too focused on the fact that there's 80. Do you have to coordinate vacation days? Because it could be like one time where like everyone's gone. And for thieves...
Absolutely. Yeah. Not to mention like, that town's sports teams and, do they even have enough for a roster? Like there a lot of questions come up with that, but
80 people.
Yeah.
That's like one of those towns where like the mayor's also the chief of police and the dentist.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's interesting about sister cities because they started out after World War II when certain cities that had suffered quite a bit during the war were paired with others that had similar experiences. And usually they were in very different parts of the world, and the idea was to promote awareness of what they'd gone through. And now, it's expanded to where, in this case, these towns are trying to promote tourism, and it's a little tongue-in-cheek, but sometimes it's cities that have the same name but are in other places, or there are any number of other reasons why cities are paired up. So, and I guess in your part of the world, Marcus, they're known as twinned with.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've always wondered that.
Yeah.
Why cities, certain towns or villages, whatever, cities are twinned with something really far away.
Right, there are a lot of different reasons, but I think in terms of the terminology, you guys call them twins, we call them sister cities, because I guess twin cities, at least in the U.S., has a somewhat different meaning. So
yeah. Wait, as in like the Twin Cities?
Right, like Minneapolis and St. Paul.
Yeah. Right. Very good. All right, 2 quick ones for you. So the first one, Sundays, spelled with an A-E, really are named after Sundays with an A-Y. So 2 places lay claim to having invented ice cream sundaes. The first one, the earliest claim belonging to Two Rivers, Wisconsin, 40 miles southeast of Green Bay on the shores of Lake Michigan. So on a summer Sunday in 1881, soda fountain owner Ed Berners, at the request of a vacationing customer, reportedly poured chocolate syrup over a bowl of vanilla ice cream. Strange, because soda was the typical accompaniment to ice cream at the time. It was a hit, so he started serving it every Sunday, thereafter for a nickel. He also mixed in other ingredients, bananas, nuts, raspberry sauce, and made up other names for them. Berners called his chocolate and ice cream treat a sundae with an AY, later changing the name to Sunday with an AE at the suggestion of a customer. However, the other claim comes from College Town in upstate New York, where our very own Victoria went, Ithaca. Officials in Ithaca claim that on Sunday, April 3rd, 1892, so 11 years after the Two Rivers, Wisconsin claim, Reverend John Scott of the local Unitarian Church dropped by the Platt and Colt Pharmacy after services to enjoy a bowl of ice cream with shop owner Chester Platt. Platt decided to add cherry syrup and candied cherry to each serving of ice cream, naming his creation the Cherry Sundae in honor of the day and his most holy company. Realizing he had a hit, he advertised the dish in the local newspaper and soon after introduced a chocolate and strawberry sundae, eventually changing the name of the dish to Sunday with an AE to avoid offending the good reverend and the church. This claim does actually have a paper trail, since there is an 1892 newspaper ad believed to have been placed the day after Platt first served his cherry sundae. So that's Sundays, that's where they come from. Second thing I've got for you, sunshine and warmth make you friendlier. According to a study in Nature Human Behavior, people who have grown up in warmer climates tend to be friendlier than those who have to deal with cold, harsh weather since day one. And the more people get outside in the sun at a young age, the happier and nicer they were throughout the rest of their lives. The researchers even concluded the perfect living temperature for maximum happiness and friendliness was 73 degrees Fahrenheit, 21 degrees Celsius. Blake, in light of recent evidence, are we sure you're not from Iceland? I'm of course kidding.
That's cold, man. That's cold.
Oh, yes! Well played. That's what we've got time for today's episode. Thank you so much to my guests. Thank you to Blake.
I guess that's one silver lining about global warming is that at least, we'll get a nicer flock of
Everyone's
people.
going to be nicer.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, you're welcome. Yeah, everyone's going to be nicer, but then angrier at the fact that we've only got a limited amount of time left. Rahul, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to Paul.
Thank you. And I just want to say that I get this data point about warmth and sunshine and friendliness, but I will say that our colleague, analyst Jasmine Enberg, is definitely a very friendly person, despite having grown up and residing in Finland.
Oh, that's true. Oh, forget my second point. It's not true. Natural human behavior, sort it out. Thank you so much to Victoria. She edits the show. Thank you to you guys for listening in. To ask us questions, just say hi. podcast@emarketer.com is where you can email us. We'll see you guys on Monday, hopefully, for the Behind the Numbers Daily, an eMarketer podcast made possible by VTEX. Happy weekends.